Good morning, I'm Craig DeGrelli. It's Monday, May 12th, 2025, and these are your Unbiased Updates. Trade deal. The United States and China agree to slash the tariffs for at least the next 90 days. The major percentage cuts by each side and what to expect when the stock market opens to start the new week. Also, President Trump touts a major announcement coming later this morning on prescription drugs. How an executive order invoking something called Most Favored Nation might affect prices.
From the Straight Arrow News Studio, bringing the stories that matter to you from across the United States and around the world, these are today's Unbiased Updates.
Breaking news this morning, the U.S. and China have agreed to significantly cut reciprocal tariffs against one another for now. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announcing this in Geneva.
We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%.
The deal comes after a weekend of talks between Bessent, American Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, and their Chinese counterparts in Switzerland. Slashing tariffs by 115% will bring American levies on Chinese products down from 145% to 30%, and China's tariffs of 125% on American imports down to 10%. The two countries will continue talks on trade and the economy over the next 90 days. Stock markets around the world rose almost immediately after the announcement. U.S. futures are up this morning. The Dow is expected to rise by about 2%, while futures in the S&P 500 are nearly 3% higher, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ up 3.5%. House Republicans have unveiled their plan to save American taxpayers billions of dollars as part of President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill. Late Sunday night, they proposed at least $880 billion in cuts, many of them to Medicaid, to help cover the cost of $4.5 trillion in tax breaks. While Republicans say they're rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse to generate savings with new work and eligibility requirements, Democrats warn millions of Americans will lose Medicaid coverage. Right now, more than 70 million Americans receive free health care through Medicaid. A preliminary estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said the proposal would reduce the number of people with health care by 8.6 million over a decade. The House Energy and Commerce Committee is scheduled to meet tomorrow to debate and refine the package. House Speaker Mike Johnson has set a deadline for Memorial Day, which is 2 weeks from today, to pass President Trump's bill of tax breaks and spending cuts. Meanwhile, President Trump announced he plans to sign an executive order today that will reduce the cost of prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals. In a post on his Truth Social platform, he said the order will drop prices, quote, almost immediately by 30 to 80%. The president says he plans to resurrect a policy from his first term to do it. The Most Favored Nation rule would reduce drug costs by basing payments for certain medicines on their prices in other countries and would apply to Medicare Part B payments for certain drugs administered in doctors' offices, not at home, though it did not specify which drugs. The rule was finalized in late 2020, but was blocked by federal courts and rescinded by then-President Joe Biden in 2021. The directive also comes as the Trump administration is looking to impose tariffs on pharmaceutical imports, a move some worry could worsen shortages of certain drugs, particularly generic medicines, and possibly increase prices. In international news, Indian and Pakistani authorities say there was no fighting reported overnight along the heavily militarized region between the countries, marking the first time the two nations have reported no fighting since a terror attack in disputed Kashmir left 26 people dead, mostly tourists. It comes after India and Pakistan agreed to a U.S.-brokered ceasefire to stop the escalating hostilities between the two nuclear-armed rivals that threatened regional peace. Senior military officials from India and Pakistan are scheduled to speak later today to assess if the ceasefire is holding. There were fears it would not hold after both countries accused each other of violating the ceasefire just hours after it was announced. Not long after the announcement on Saturday, Pakistan reopened all of its airports and restored flight operations. India followed up Monday, reopening all 32 of its airports that had been shut down temporarily because of the deadly violence. Russia has reportedly rejected the ceasefire that Ukraine has made a condition of starting peace talks to end the war between the two countries. In a post on his Truth Social platform, President Donald Trump said this: President Putin of Russia doesn't want to have a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, but rather wants to meet on Thursday in Turkey to negotiate a possible end to the bloodbath. The president said Ukraine should agree to that meeting anyway, saying at least they will be able to determine whether or not a deal is possible. And if it is not, European leaders and the U.S. will know where everything stands and can proceed accordingly. Shortly after that post, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he is prepared to meet with Vladimir Putin this week. This all follows a meeting in Kyiv on Saturday, during which Ukraine's major European allies gave Russia an ultimatum: agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine by today or face massive new sanctions. While Putin did not acknowledge the ultimatum in a late-night address Saturday, he did propose holding direct talks with Ukraine, something that has not been done since the early weeks of Moscow's full-scale invasion more than 3 years ago. In a post on X Sunday, Zelensky called on Putin to show up in person for the talks, saying, quote, "I will be in Turkey this Thursday, and I expect Putin to come to Turkey as well, personally." Some very encouraging news this morning for the family of Idan Alexander. He is believed to be the last remaining hostage who has American citizenship being held by Hamas. Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, confirmed to NBC News on Sunday that he will be in the Middle East today to secure the release of Alexander. Alexander is a dual citizen of the United States and Israel who grew up in New Jersey. He was serving in the Israel Defense Forces on October 7, 2023, when the terror group Hamas attacked Israel and took more than 200 hostages. There are only about 20 left who are alive. The Hamas negotiating team said in a statement his impending release is part of the steps being taken to achieve a ceasefire, open the crossing, and allow aid, an obvious reference to Gaza. President Trump said on his Truth Social platform this was a step taken in good faith towards the United States and the efforts of mediators to put an end to this very brutal war and return all living hostages and their remains to their loved ones. Hopefully, this is the first of those final steps necessary to end this brutal conflict. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas fell apart back in March. Just last week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel was planning to capture the entire Gaza Strip. More than 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza would be forced to move out and leave. Finally this morning, flight disruptions continue at one of the nation's busiest airports after another equipment issue over the weekend. The Federal Aviation Administration had to order a 45-minute ground stop at Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey on Sunday morning. Now, that came after an air traffic control facility that guides planes at Newark had a brief radar outage on Friday, less than 2 weeks after a similar 90-second outage at the end of last month. While the FAA said Sunday's incident was an audio issue, not an outage, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned on Sunday that more American airports could face similar disruptions as the busy summer travel season gets started, saying, quote, "What you see in Newark is going to happen in other places across the country." By the way, have you flown lately? It's not easy, especially if you check luggage. And you know, when you think about it, it's pretty sad that when you plan a trip, you have to almost work in or plan for difficulties, and at the very worst, it might be a nightmare. Yikes. Good luck this summer, right? Those are your unbiased updates for this Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For all of us here at Straight Arrow News, I'm Craig DeGrelli. Have a great day.